Welcome to an evergreen temperate rainforest, or at least what I imagine a evergreen temperate rainforest to be like. Thank you for joining me today. I'm here with all of these beautiful ferns and mosses and decaying trees and tall evergreens just dancing in the wind. There's a few deciduous trees as well, and those are the ones that drop their leaves, but most of the trees that are here are the ones that last and remain green for all year long. You know, the only thing that I'm essentially missing perhaps right now is the raptors sneaking through the tall ferns that are dancing in the wind and, all being silent and stuff. So, I have everything with the exception of that which I don't need, which as I said, is the raptors, because I'm not looking to run through any sort of Jurassic Park movie and keep my adrenaline flowing. I'm here to essentially ground and reconnect with this beautiful, luscious green planet that we all find ourselves in. Actually, today I'm at a place called Bridal Falls, and I recognize that a lot of people essentially name their waterfalls Bridal Falls. There's actually another Bridal Falls near Harrison Hot Springs if you take a rather long boat ride out across the lake to the other side. And I think that the whole idea with calling a falls Bridal Falls is kind of like that idea or the illusion or imagery of a bride within her veil. And you'll see if you look on my channel today that I may or may not, depending on when I do them, have videos up. I will eventually for sure use this footage because this waterfall is spectacular. I mean, you can get right up close to it. Although there's a sign that literally says, don't go any further. And yet if you do go further, there's actually structures that perhaps were once built, but maybe there was an issue with over-watering or the waterfall. Today it's kind of like not as abundant in water. I've seen it when it's a lot more. This one is more like a veil, a very thin veil, as you'll see in the videos, which I may or may not link, depending on if I get reminded to. So just an overall general note, if you ever see a video and I have said, I'm going to link this video here, if you ever want to do me a solid, please let me or remind me that I need to link a specific video. I often do try, but I often also forget. So thank you for joining me and these ferns here for this conversation, a much ado about nothing. Actually, I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about because, as I continue on in my journey, I'm realizing there is a lot more connection with the things that I want to say, but yet at the same time, they're not coming over in abundance. See, when I was living in my house, I would often have Epsom salt or essential oil baths almost every day, sometimes even 2 times a day. And I realized a lot of the reason why I was having the Epsom salt baths is I found out or discovered or was told, instructed, that when you have a salt bath, it helps cleanse or clear your field. So if you're living in a place where there's a lot of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections and, you're living in between 2 cell towers like I was, could you believe that? They turned the 2 apartment buildings that were on my right and my left of my low rise, and that's a 3-story building, they turned the 2 sky rises or the tall towers on either side of me into essentially cell towers. They had all the cell tower stuff on top of both of the buildings, and I was living right in between those for such a long time. And so I totally get and understand why I was directed or perhaps guided to constantly have baths, because those baths were cleaning my field. They were allowing me to continue my strengthening of my connection to source, to God, to, something greater than me. And at the same time, they were cleansing all of those, energies, whether they came from the cell towers, whether they were directed from perhaps people with counter intentions or just overall operatives, regardless. And so I was able to, heal And I think healing comes with being out in nature. And now I have this wonderful opportunity. Although my current circumstances don't allow for me to have many possessions, as I mentioned in my previous podcast, I let most of my stuff go. But at the same time, that was perhaps we'll call it a test to see how much I could let go to go where I wanted to go. See, there was this lesson that I had learned one time from Kevin, and he had said, well, a good test of if you're ready to get what you truly want is what are you willing to let go? And in that case, he was talking more so about those things in our lives that, we depend on for daily routine, such as, going golfing. If your passion is golfing, are you willing to let up or let go of those golf clubs for, an extended period of time to simply work towards that which you want? And, there was a few years ago where I did just that, meaning that I had essentially joined a online program to instruct me of how to work with TFT. And TFT was thought field therapy. And so for a whole week, I gave up everything and I went off to visit a place called Hope. That's a place where I was just at recently. And for that duration of time, or I guess it was 4 days, but every day I spent 6 to 8 hours studying and working and perfecting that technique of TFT because I was willing to give up. Even just, in that sense, it was a vacation time because although I went to a really nice place, I sat in the motel and I just continued studying over and over again. And it wasn't just that while I was studying. There was another course that I was studying as well. And that had to do with self-confidence and essentially personal mastery. And so I was willing to give up my vacation time, you can call it, to simply work and invest my energies on building and healing myself. And so when you're looking at those things that you truly do want in life, keeping in mind, not everything that we want in life is something that we get in life. Meaning that sometimes the things that we think we want, we actually don't really want. Perhaps we've been programmed to believe we want them. For instance, if you have a perfectly good cell phone that does absolutely everything you want, well, an advertisement might have convinced you that you wanted the newest one. Or perhaps that program to keep up with the Joneses, part of the, what do they call it? The non-compete plan, supposedly, perhaps. But nonetheless, keeping up with the Joneses. Maybe that's the reason why you want that new car when the car you have right now is perfect and the best one that you could have for yourself. Like, for instance, for me, my car was the perfect car and it has been the perfect car for all of these years. And although I, have the desire to drive a vehicle that's more appropriate to my size and my current, we'll call it vocation within life, I definitely would love to upgrade to a 4x4 vehicle where I can tow something and I can carry a lot more and at the same time, not spend an arm and a leg on gas. Some of those big vehicles, those big RVs, they spend a lot of money on gas. So I'd rather stick with like a Nissan Rogue or a Nissan Pathfinder, as I've mentioned before. And well, anyways, back to my car. For a long time, I wanted a new car, but I realized after a long time that the car that I had was the perfect car for me because it was one of the last computerized or the last cars to happen within that line of cars before computerization really went into effect. So I learned that was a reason, and it's done me a really great job of getting me everywhere I want to go from across Canada and back again to so many different places in my own province. And yeah, it's done a tremendous job. It's been a great car. So all those times that I had wanted another car, well, I perhaps wasn't aware of what chain reactions would have occurred should I have had that new car. And other things that we want in our lives sometimes, as I mentioned before, wanting a yacht, for example, but yet not recognizing that all the maintenance and the upkeep of having that yacht, or even having that monster mansion that you want to live in to invite all your friends so they can see how well you're doing, but then you have to pay all of the people, the staff. And if you're not necessarily in a financial position where you can afford, or, you even want to earn all that money just so you can have people clean the house that you perhaps don't even go through the whole day. Like, imagine having those large houses, and there's rooms in the house that need to be cleaned on a daily or weekly basis that you may not even go into. But yet, in order to keep them clean, you might have maids and other cleaners and such that are having to be paid in order to get there. So, yeah, well, I've already talked about that before, so we'll end that little part right there. But we'll get back out into, me being out here and connecting. See, now that I don't have those energetic fields and those counter intentions and those people around me that perhaps don't really understand what I'm doing, they don't see me on a regular basis worried about what is he doing. For the last, I guess, 4 years, but 3 years specifically, all across North America, I have sat in Starbucks and out loud I've read Paul Selig's books, and I've often mentioned this before, but what I've done recently is traditionally, and I'll say traditionally, for at least 2 to 3 years, I was always putting my headphones on so that I didn't, I'm just adjusting the mic so there isn't wind, so that so that I couldn't necessarily hear. And so I don't necessarily know how loud or how quiet I was talking, probably a little loud, but now I do it without having to worry about putting earphones on, and I just read aloud. I recognize that there may be, and there are people that hear me, and even if they don't consciously hear me, they unconsciously hear me. And there's other beings around me. I do get the idea that there is a veil shattered across or spread across our reality, and there are things that we're unable to see, perhaps because we've been programmed to disbelieve that they exist, or there's actually a physical overlay that perhaps separates our vision from actually interpreting their presence. But yet I do fully understand that there are energies that are hearing my voice and they're hearing me read that book. And those books are phenomenal when it comes to, just grounding positive vibrations. Even if you have another belief, just by sharing those ideas and thoughts, there's a lot that you can learn through discernment from any type of, even religion or, groups and communities. There's so much, if you have and you maintain your discernment and you work with that, there's so much that you can incorporate and bring into your own field. See, the challenge is not jumping 2 feet in and saying, okay, well, I'll just go and agree with that person because he sounded, right about 1 or 2 things, so I'll just agree with everything he says. I highly recommend that, you practice discernment and you really think over the things that are said, because sometimes the way that you perceive them initially won't necessarily be the way that they were intentionally delivered. And see, that has to do with how we perceive and our own personal filters. But yet oftentimes when you're spending or you're suspending yourself within the nature, within these ferns, just as I am right now, you allow yourself to release a lot of the energies. And whether these energies are, entities or, dark little spheres within your field, or they're whatever else, demons and, so many different things, narcissistic energies, whatever it is, allowing them to essentially depart. And for us to sit here right now on the soil with my cotton pants, like they're jeans, but they're made of cotton, and I'm grounding. I'm balancing my energies with the earth. And I think that this is a phenomenal activity that you can do if you have any sort of ailment, is just to simply ground, to allow the earth to perhaps take on some of that energy and then rebalance you with the positive energy. it also, of course, helps in some people. They have the ability to perhaps anchor in energy, and then also grounding it allows that energy to flow into the earth. You know, there's a time, or there has been a time for quite a while, where there was such a go, go, go energy. Everyone was driving in their cars, and there was so many times when it was rush hour, like almost all day long, and so many people wanting to work and ride and bike and work and go this and go there and drive here and drive. It was just so much. And the people that I, had within my life, they were always going somewhere. They were always doing some sort of work, working later hours and such. And yet I feel that what's been happening recently is there has been so much more incoming energy into our system. And when I mean system, I mean this big ball of light that we call our planet, with us and our nature all on top of it and within it and all that lovely stuff. That the sun, perhaps, or other sources of energy, has been creating a large amount of incoming energy. And that incoming energy has been connecting with all Homo sapiens. And for some people who aren't necessarily able to, or perhaps don't understand the need for resting, they run out and they just essentially want to burn off all that energy. Versus they could perhaps utilize it to a better degree and anchor it into the earth by simply sitting down on the ground with the trees and the plants and, just enjoying it and relaxing it, and then letting it sink into the earth. It's just a thought. These are all just thoughts. These are all things that I had been thinking about, that I've done, all the way from that Epsom salt bath to protecting me, but also washing away the other energies, and also blocking me from counter intentions and such, and psychic attacks perhaps as well. There's a lot within this world that we are unaware of, but yet every moment of every day we are becoming more and more aware of it. And I find that fundamentally awesome. And not awesome is the fact of what the word really means, but just miraculous, amazing, beautiful, divine, elegant, wonderful. All of these high vibrational words. And yeah. So as I said when I started, really all I'm missing right now is a domesticated raptor named Blue, who just wants me to pet it. That's all I'm missing right now. Everything else I have right now, and I recognize that. I recognize that, as we let go more of what we thought we had to hold on to. See, I'll wrap it up right here and now with a podcast that I did recently, and I'm going to link it at the end of this video because it's one of the most interesting locations that I did a video on. I actually recorded this whole podcast from above the Coquihalla Canyon on a cliff overlooking these whitewater rapids. And I sat there for quite a few hours off the trail, deep off the trail, and I recorded a podcast. And this particular podcast talked about Pokémon and Pikachu and Ash again. And I related so many different things, but what's most important about letting go is that for a long time ago, I've been talking about how amazing it would be to live, like Ash lives, out on an adventure, going from place to place and meeting so many people and making new friends and catching new Pokemons and then training with those Pokemons. And then he just continues going on, meeting. He's always available to meet someone new or meet a creature in the forest, and they're called Pokemon. And they're conscious beings who, at some times in their lives, they also want to get stronger, and finding a trainer who can essentially push them to be stronger is what they want. And so for a long time, I've been talking about how I would love to live that life, but yet I was still in a home every day, cleansing my field and doing my studying and going to Starbucks and repeating that cycle and that routine. But yet I was getting bored because I wanted to be out here. And now I'm here. It unfortunately, not fortunately, but regardless, it wasn't necessarily the way that I would have preferred. I would have preferred a proper conclusion to a lot of the loose ends that we'll call them. But yet it got me to where I needed to be. And actually, as a large benefit, it allowed me to disconnect with so many items that I might have, tried to put into storage and held on to. I might have got a storage room or got a roommate and saved these things. But yet I would have been carrying around that energy. And I recognize and especially now, if I want the future or the life that I would prefer to live, then I have to be able to make space for it. And so I've made a considerable amount of space. And now, I can definitely see the incoming of a lot of these things that I've been working for a long time. And even with my son, we all have our own journeys, and he's now slightly off on his, having a different experience while I'm out here learning how to do this. And when I say learning how to do this, when I was in my early 20s, I backpacked across Japan and China. And so I know how to, live not necessarily off grid, but from a backpack, from a rather large backpack, recognizing that I have to keep all of my stuff, in tow and on my back, and, having that connection to everything that you have in the world at that point. See, when I went to Japan and China, I put all my stuff in storage, so I didn't have a home. I just left, and I took my backpack with me, and I went backpacking. When I came back to Canada, I found a place, I rented it, and then I had a new home again. But I had that experience in my 20s of living less a home. And I'm going to do a whole podcast called Less a Home soon. But anyways, and so I recognize that I've had that experience, so I knew what I was driving towards, but yet having an idea of it, and especially with I am a different person now than when I was 20 years old, and there's different circumstances. When I was 20 years old, my mother was alive, so I always had my mother to go to. But yet my mother passed away in 2010, so I don't have that same, family structure that I once had. And actually my brother passed away as well, and other family members. Anyways, we'll get into that. But my point is that things have changed for me. And so I had to get out here and show myself once again that I was able to be out here on the road doing what I wanted to do. And now as I move forward, I will eventually upgrade those circumstances and continue doing what I'm doing, because I want to get a lot more than I've got. So, yeah, that's a little spin on that. But anyways, thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me in this